faced tyrants and would-be gods. Seen friends lose life and limb. But there's always someone bent on breaking the world.
Dragon Age Dreadwolf is, as the time of recording this video, still a pretty big mystery. We have a title, we've seen a couple of trailers and some concept art, but other than that we don't actually know that much about it yet. I mean, I guess we know we're going to Tevinter and we're gonna see Solas again, but what's BioWare's plan for the gameplay? Will there be something similar to Origin Stories? Will we see our Inquisitor again? Will there be closure for Solar Valens? Yeah, no, that'll never happen. With Inquisition having been released almost 8 years ago... Holy shit, 8 years! Fuck, I feel old now. And with Inquisition having been released almost 8 years ago now, we've had plenty of time to wonder and speculate. Something I've seen people ask and have thought about myself a lot is, will the game have an open world structure like Inquisition? And should it? Well, I wanted to talk about this, so I decided to make a video about it and kinda share my thoughts with you all. And hopefully I'll get you guys to talk about it as well, because I'd love to hear what you think. Also, this is probably going to be a bit of a longer video again, as I'm also going to talk about the level structure of the previous games. So if you want to skip ahead to the part where I talk about Dreadwolf specifically, there will be chapter markers below, as usual. Now, without further ado, grab yourself a nice warm cup of chai tea and let's discuss. Should Dragon Age Dreadwolf be open world or not? So to start off, how do I feel about open world in general? Well, generally my experience with open world has been pretty positive. The open world games that I've played include Skyrim, most of the Assassin's Creed games, Mass Effect Andromeda, Dragon Age Inquisition of course, and a few hours of The Witcher 3. And yes, I should really finish that game, I know. I'm sure there's more, but these are just the ones that I remember off the top of my head. Anyway, I did really enjoy the open world games that I played. However, there are some things that I don't like. Because this video is about Dragon Age, I will be using Inquisition as an example. So out of the 3 Dragon Age games, Inquisition is actually my favorite, for many reasons that I'll probably talk about another time. But despite it being my favorite, I do find it the hardest one to get through. I've done about 4 full playthroughs of the entire series, and every time I get to Inquisition I feel myself getting overwhelmed and distracted. Apart from the 4 full playthroughs, I started at least 3 other playthroughs in Inquisition that I just couldn't be bothered to finish. Of course, Inquisition is the bigger game, so naturally it takes more time to get through, but I don't think that's necessarily the problem for me. I think for me it's the fact that the zones are just so damn big. I'm kind of a completionist, so I always want to make sure I've done absolutely everything, and I don't like missing things. And even if I've already finished the game once before, I still get the tendencies to do as much content as possible. Now, you might say, well Lisa, that sounds like a you problem. And I say to that, why yes, you are absolutely right. Open worlds can just be a bit much for me. Especially when one of the starting zones is extremely big and filled with lots and lots of quest markers, landmarks and icons, and yes, I am of course talking about everyone's favorite place, the hinterlands! Yeah, you suck, now go away. All jokes aside, I know many people find the hinterlands overwhelming. Me being one of them. DAO and DA2's level layouts were, in my opinion, always very clear and not too big. There usually were a lot of side areas to explore, but there was always a clear path. Coming from those games, DAI's large open world maps were just so different and it took me a while to get used to. Back when I first played it, I wasn't as patient with games as I am now, and when I saw how big the hinterlands was and how much I felt like I had to do in order to progress the main story, I just got so overwhelmed that I stopped playing for a while. Of course I came back to the game eventually, and I'm so glad I did, because if I didn't, well, I probably wouldn't be making this video right now, and I would be missing out on what's literally my favorite game. I did get used to Inquisition's open areas eventually, and after a second playthrough I even started appreciating them. I grew to love exploring every corner of each zone, and just taking my time, reading codex entries, doing side quests, it was relaxing in a way, I guess. And very satisfying to fully complete each zone. After doing it 2 or 3 times, however, it does get old. And yeah, I know, that's my own fault. I mean, I have played this game, well, a lot. Something that I do want to point out, I've seen a lot of people compare both Inquisition and Andromeda's quests to MMO quests, because there are quite a lot of fetch quests in both games. But there is something else that I noticed that reminded me of an MMO. And maybe it's just me, but something I tended to do in both Inquisition and Andromeda, but mostly in Andromeda, was that I ended up doing all the side quests that were close to each other in one area. Like, I would go to one area, pick up all the quests there, and then as I was doing them, I would pick up any quests that I'd come across and then deliver them all in one go. Which is what I normally do when I play MMOs. And it makes sense because it's just much more efficient. But with games like Dragon Age and Mass Effect, I very much prefer to just focus on one or maybe two quests at a time and finish them before doing something else, because I find it more immersive that way. Doing them all in one go kinda caused me to lose track of their storylines, and I felt more like I was working my way through a list rather than actually enjoying the stories the quest had to offer. But at the same time, because there were so many, I just wanted to get them done, so I ended up doing what I felt like was most efficient rather than going for what was more immersive. What do you think though? Was your experience similar? Alright, so before I talk about whether I think Dragon Age Dreadwolf should be open world or not, I want to take a look at the structure of the previous Dragon Age games and how they are in terms of linearity. Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 are obviously not open world, but they're definitely not completely linear either. You get to create your own character, choose your race and class, you get different dialogue options depending on your race and class, and your actions have consequences on the story. There are multiple endings, and of course the AO has multiple origin stories. Some of Origin's levels are more open than others, but they're all separate maps that give you one way to reach your goal, with a lot of side areas to explore if you wish. After a certain point, there isn't really a strict order in which you have to do these levels. For Origins, you play through your origin story first, then Ostagar, and then Lothering. And you always end up fighting the Archdemon in Denerim, but between those main events you are free to choose which area you want to go to next, and you can always travel back and forth between them. Well, apart from Lothering. You progress the game by doing your main quests, of course. And each of those main quests can have slightly different outcomes depending on what choices you make. Like choosing a king for Orzammar during a Paragon of her kind, or trying to broker peace between the Danish and the werewolves, or end up siding with either of them, during Nature of the Beast. Most of the side quests are completely optional and can be ignored if you want to. Though I wouldn't recommend it, cause you'd be missing out on good content. Like, really. Come on, look at his face. You don't want to miss out on that, do you? Anyway, the way you handle companion quests will affect their approval of you. The same goes for not doing their quests or simply even refusing to take it in the first place. Your companions can leave depending on your actions, and you also have the choice of kicking out or killing some of them. Or you could simply refuse their request to join you. There are often multiple ways of getting out of a situation. One in particular I really like is at the end of the quest Rescue the Queen, where, after freeing Honora, we are being confronted by Sir Cothrian, or however you pronounce her name.
In the name of the Regent, I am placing you under arrest for the murder of Rendon Howe and his men-at-arms. Surrender, and you may be shown mercy.
If you choose surrender, she will take the Warden and Alistair if he's present captive, and will start the quest Captured. However, if you choose to resist, you'll have to fight her and her guards. Now, this is one of the toughest challenges in the game, but it is not impossible to defeat her. And if you manage to do so, you will walk away free. I've never managed to do it myself, and it took me actually years to find out it was even possible. My point is though, Dragon Age Origins may not be open world, but I would say overall, it is pretty non-linear. The levels themselves are more linear, but the order in which you do them is mostly up to you after a certain point. While your general end goal is always the same, the game's ending doesn't have to be. It all depends on your choices. Dragon Age 2 is similar in a lot of ways to Dragon Age Origins. You can create your own character, and though Hawke is always human, you do get to choose your own class. There's choice and consequence, the game has separate maps with side areas to explore. A big difference is, while the AO has a few main story quests that you can do in whatever order you want, Dragon Age 2 has 3 specific acts. Each act offers you main quests that can be done in whatever order, but the acts themselves are always played in the same order. I'd also argue that the story is a little bit more linear. I think because it works with the 3-act structure, and the choices are less detailed as compared to Origins. Think of Ferelden's king or queen, the dark ritual, who killed the archdemon, did they survive? The Warden is also more of a blank slate, whereas Hawke is more of a defined character. Now, I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing, it's really up to your personal preference. But in terms of linearity, I think Dragon Age 2's story leans a little bit more towards the linear side. So what about Dragon Age Inquisition? And you know what? Because it follows a similar structure to Inquisition, and because it is BioWare's latest release, apart from Anthem, but we don't talk about that, I will also mention Mass Effect Andromeda. And I brought it up earlier anyway. So what about Inquisition and Andromeda? They are both open world, right? Well, yeah, kinda. In my recent video, Open Worlds versus Linear Levels, I talked in depth about the differences between open world and linear and their definitions, so if you want a more detailed explanation, I definitely recommend you watch it. But for this video and the sake of time, I'll summarize what generally defines an open world game. Non-linearity, huge open areas, no artificial barriers, and player autonomy. Both Inquisition and Andromeda tick most of these boxes. But while most people, including myself, refer to these games as open world, they're technically not fully open world. Yes, their maps are big open areas with no artificial barriers, but if we look at Skyrim for example, it's got one big map. Within the map there are many towns and other places you can go to, and you have the ability to fast travel, but you could walk from one end of the map all the way to the other. It would take a while, but you could if you wanted to. It is one big open world. With Inquisition and Andromeda, this is not the case. Instead you have a world map, or galaxy map in Andromeda's case, and from the world map you can select the area you want to travel to. So unlike Skyrim, the areas on the map are not connected. They are separate maps only accessible by your world map, and you can't walk from one to the other. This makes sense in Andromeda's case of course, cause, well, the areas are literally different planets, but you get my point. They're not one big open world. In an interview with Rock Paper Shotgun about Dragon Age Inquisition, Mike Laidlaw has said the following. Open world, I think, is a really loaded term, because everyone immediately thinks of Skyrim and assumes everything will be exactly like Skyrim. In our case, there are extremely large regions you can explore. It's a multi-region game, which means that you'll be traveling with a world map. I would say that it has elements of open world for sure, but it's something closer to the feel we had in the Baldur's Gate games or Origins even, where it's larger areas, big spaces, and a chance for you to move around and see a wide variety of different terrains and locales and so on. So while Dragon Age Inquisition and Mass Effect Andromeda technically aren't true open worlds, the areas themselves do meet most of the open world criteria. What about player autonomy though? How much freedom do we actually have when it comes to exploring and doing quests? Well, both Inquisition and Andromeda have a structure similar to their predecessors. There are main tasks that you have to do in order to progress the game, and other than that, you are free to do side quests whenever you want to. Except in Inquisition this is not completely true. The game has a mechanic where you need a certain amount of power in order to unlock the next part of the main quest. Power can be gained by closing fade rifts, establishing camps, and doing side quests. So this means in order to progress the main story, you have to do an extra side quest or two. As for accessing areas, not all areas are immediately accessible after the game's introduction quest. In both games, you'll first have to complete specific quests or progress the story in order to unlock certain areas. In Inquisition, most areas become available after arriving to Skyhold, and they'll have to be unlocked using power. In Andromeda, the first open area you get to explore is Eos, and the other planets will become available as you progress through the story. Alright, I think I've rambled enough about the past. What about the future? What about Dragon Age Dreadwolf? Do I think it should be open world? What would a Dragon Age Dreadwolf open world game even look like? If BioWare decides to take the open world approach again, I don't think they'd go full open world. I think they'd stick with what they've done for Inquisition. A world map with several locations you can travel to, each location being a big open area to explore. And I mean, with Dreadwolf being set in Tevinter, there is a lot of potential. We're going to places we've never been before, and it could be very cool to explore each of them Inquisition style. But whether or not BioWare is actually going for the open world approach is hard to say at this point. For now we can only speculate. From what we know of Project Joplin, which was Dragon Age Dreadwolf's codename before it got rebooted and renamed to Morrison, the game was going to be hugely reactive, smaller in scope than Dragon Age Inquisition, but much larger in player choice, followers, reactivity and depth. So to me it seems that BioWare were actually planning on moving away from the open world approach. Of course it's impossible to say how much of this carried over to the current version of Morrison. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Now what I can talk about is whether or not I think Dragon Age Dreadwolf should be open world, or semi-open world like Inquisition. And to be honest, I don't think I want Dragon Age Dreadwolf to be open world. I mean, if it does turn out to be open world, of course I'd still get the game and no-life the heck out of it, then I'm sure I'd still love it, but I just don't think it would be the best for the game. Personally, I'd prefer BioWare to step away from the open world approach and focus on where their strengths are. Writing incredible stories, making compelling characters, and giving me choices that make me stare at my screen for 10 minutes and go, fuck, what do I do? A great example of this is Trespasser. I think Trespasser is considered to be one of the best Dragon Age DLCs among a lot of fans. I mean, of course not everybody, but most of the people I've talked to really like Trespasser, and it's my personal favorite. I really think this is BioWare at their best, and yes, I'm totally going to ignore the Harlequins and Firework minigames. Sure, the maps in Trespasser might not be as big as the ones in the base game, but remember, smaller, less open maps make it easier for the devs to focus on a well-paced, fully fleshed out story, and doing so means there will be no need for filling the big open map with fetch quests either. And of course I wouldn't mind if the maps were a little bit bigger than the ones in Trespasser, but I guess I just want them to go back to the more linear-ish style maps that Dragon Age Origins and 2 had. With those kind of maps, there is still plenty of opportunity to add in interesting side quests or hidden areas or Easter eggs and stuff like that, and I still really enjoyed exploring them. As for what other people think, well, from what I've seen on forums and heard from the people I've talked to, I think most people wouldn't mind Dreadwolf being open world, as long as the devs manage to fill the areas with engaging and meaningful quests that don't feel like a list of chores. If there is enough depth and detail in the world, people will enjoy wandering off the main path and do side content, and they'll want to keep exploring. People want to see the world of Dragon Age in a large scale, a living, breathing world where you truly feel the impact of your choices. Basically, quality over quantity. If an open world style Dragon Age Dreadwolf is something BioWare can pull off, great. If not, I think most would prefer something closer to what the previous games had. But of course, that's just what I've heard and seen, and I'd love to hear what your opinion is. Do you want an open world style for Dragon Age Dreadwolf, or would you prefer a more linear approach? And I guess that's all I have for now. I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble on about video games, and as always, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, let me know by liking this video, or leave a comment and let me know what your wishes for Dragon Age Dreadwolf are. Not just the open world thing, just anything. Story, gameplay, returning characters, whatever you can think of. I'd love to read it all. That's it for now though. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.